Okay, let's talk about Tisha B'Av. I'll be honest, my when I like to talk about Tisha B'Av, and it's generally the same idea every year because I need chizuk in this idea every single year. It's not with fancy drushes or fancy sources, frankly. You're gonna get all of that in all the live streams and all the, this rabbi and that public speaker and this telethon and this video about sinas chinam and this about concept our concept. You don't need the sources from me. You'll get it. I'm sure you've heard it. We did a bunch of it last a couple weeks ago when we talked about the 3 weeks. Tisha B'Av, I would argue, is, or at least a sheer before Tisha B'Av, I would argue is about one Nakuda and one in Nakuda only, right? One topic, and that is relating to Tisha B'Av. It's normally it's also for us to be sad, right? Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha, right? We have to serve Hashem with happiness. The Tochacha, right, says that the Tachas Asher Lavadat is Hashem Elokecha b'simcha v'tuv levav, that we get punished for not serving Hashem with simcha. On Tisha B'Av, that's not true. A lot of uh, Avodah Hashem is accomplished with mourning and crying and sadness. And it's very hard to make that shift and allow yourself to get into that mode because normally it's not good. But that Nakuda, I would argue, is the most important Nakuda of Tisha B'Av, of being able to relate and able to get into that zone. And I think I'm just going to talk about that again. We'll have some sources, but I think that's a Nakuda worth spending, a few minutes on. For us nowadays, Tisha B'Av is probably, I would argue, the hardest holiday to relate to. And that's for a single reason. And that's because we are more wealthy and comfortable in our lives at this point than in any point in human history. So it is exceedingly difficult to relate to the concept of, oh, we're in exile. I wish things were different because we really don't. Right, let's be real. Like in a world where there's Starbucks in every corner and you can fly to different parts of the world in hours and you can stream every entertainment medium to your face in seconds. And even simpler, right? We have bread. We've talked about this before. We have bread in every single supermarket. I mean, think how simple that is, right? Aside from the past like 150 years, how did you get bread? You didn't walk down the block to like the bodega or something. You had to plow your field, plant your grain, reap your grain, process your grain, grind your grain, make it into flour, bake it, etc., etc. If there was a bad crop, there was no food. Right? We don't even understand what that means. Right? For Jews, right, growing up in the 19th, 20th, 21st century in the Western world, even in the aftermath of Corona and the Holocaust and October 7th, the concepts of suffering and exile and destruction carry very little meaning. Yes, it's more meaning than maybe they did like 6, 7 years ago, fine. But still very little meaning. Like people throw around the phrase like I'm starving. Right? They throw it around like a baseball on a Sunday afternoon. Right? If you go to a family barbecue and right, it's delayed by like half an hour because one family couldn't get into the car because the kids are going crazy. Everyone is starving. Right? For Jews at the time of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, starving meant that the mothers were eating their children. Quite literally. That's what the Pasuk says in the Torah, and the Kinos say that as well. Right? People in Russia during World War II used to wait online for hours to get a loaf of bread. Right? Pincus writes this in his Sefer Galus and Nechama. Nowadays, like if you don't have your type of bread in the supermarket, so people like lose their minds. Right? Again, our definition of hardship is like waiting a week before our phone arrives in the mail, or the internet is slow. Hardship for parents in Poland were sending their kids off to Hungary to never see them again because they might have a small percentage of surviving the war. And I apologize for giving example after example, but we really know nothing of real, true, horrific suffering. At least, certainly, the type of suffering we talk about in the Kinos and in Eicha and in Midrashim. And even the Holocaust has faded, mostly into memory. Most of the recent passing of a lot of the survivors, your children will not see a person with numbers tattooed on their arm, right? Unless it was obviously done willingly or whatever, right? In an age where like historical truth is like politics, so like the Holocaust is a debate. Right? Say nothing of the pogroms, the Crusades, and the expulsions. And we have no shakas that whatsoever. And this is a nisayon, right? This is a test, right? This wealth and health and prosperity is a tremendous test, no doubt about it. It's obviously a much more pleasant test, right, than the threat of being like thrown into ovens, right? I'll give you that. But make no mistake, it is a test. The Pasuk tells us by the man, right, in Perek Ches Pasuk Tes Zayin. I think it's this week's parsha. I could be wrong. But more also by the man beforehand, right? In when they got the man, in Sefer Shmos, Pasuk says, "Laman anasenu hayilich b'torah lo," that the man was a test as to whether Bnei Yisrael would follow Hashem's Torah. So what does that mean? Right? What kind of test was the man? Right? It seemed like a tremendous gift. So there are many possibilities in the Rishonim. The Or HaChaim writes that the test was that when Bnei Israel had no parnaso worries whatsoever, they got man bread falling from the sky, they got water from Baer Miriam, and they were free to do whatever they wanted. They had all of the time in the world. Right? So what did they do with their time? That was the test. And it's not exactly the same as today, but it's similar. It's similar to how it is today. Right? Obviously, we have to work and we have to make a living, but there's so much wealth and comfort, and you don't have to work as hard as they used to. The question is, what do you do with your free time? Can you appreciate all the gifts that Kosh Baruch Hu has given you, or do you demand more? Right? If we have 24 hours in the day, right, and we sleep for 8 hours and we work for 8 hours, that's a lot of sleep, by the way. Okay, but you still have 8 hours in the day left. Right? How do you spend that time? Right? And Psukim in Parshas Ekev, which we'll read in 2 weeks, right? When things get good, right? The pasuk says, "Don't forget Hakadosh Baruch Hu." Right? When you eat and you're satiated, when you build nice homes, when you have lots of property and possessions, gold and silver, and don't get haughty and forget where it all came from. Right? Don't say Kochi v'yotzim yadi l'asali azachai lazeh. Don't think that you're the source of all your success. Remember, it's from Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So being wealthy and comfortable is certainly a test, right? In that sense. But another way it's a test is that we cannot relate to the concept of exile. Right? It's very difficult to bring ourselves to wish for quote unquote better times. Right? Yes, okay, things are like crazy in the United States right now. Believe me, they're not nearly as crazy as they were in Germany 80 years ago, or Spain 600 years ago, or Yerushalayim in the times of the exiles. So how can we relate to Tisha B'Av? It's a day that is so central to our Jewish faith, right? How can we come to terms with Tisha B'Av's true meaning? Like, a lot of people struggle, myself certainly included, for many years. They think, what's the big deal, right? Yerushalayim is not a ruin; it's a huge city, right? The Jews are back. Right? So what's the problem? Well, again, we could debate that. I mean, I could take you to East Jerusalem, right, where you could never go because you might die. Okay, that's Yerushalayim is a split city. We can't go to the other side. That half was probably more important because the Beis Hamikdash faced that way. Right, the Kotel is the back. Right. Okay. So, but how can we truly appreciate Tisha B'Av nowadays? So I would argue the answer starts with shifting perspectives. For many people, Tisha B'Av is presented as mourning for a building that was destroyed 2,000 years ago, a building that we have no connection to almost whatsoever, a building that we don't even know what it looks like unless you study the obscure Mishnayos and Gemaras that you guys for sure have not exposed to. Maybe you've seen a picture, right? And maybe AI has led you around it or something. If you've seen, maybe you remember the video thing that you saw, maybe you Shana Aleph. But most of us cannot relate to the building, right? And that's the problem in the sense that it's not about a building. It's not about a building. Right? Rav Chaim Voloshin, again, we talked about a couple of weeks ago that Rav Chaim Voloshin writes in Nefesh HaChaim, by the time the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, it was merely sticks and stones. Why we had already destroyed the Beis Hamikdash in Shamayim. Okay, but the real proof is the fast. Right? We fast on Tisha B'Av. Right? History tells us, Chazal tells us, the Psukim tell us that the Beis Hamikdash started burning in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, but it burned all the way to the midday of the 10th of Yud of, when it finally collapsed. And that's why we have a lot of the halachos in the 9 days extend until the middle of the day after, the middle of the 10th of Av. Now, this year it's a little bit relaxed because it's Erev Shabbos. Okay. But if the morning was solely for the destruction of the building, well, we're starting our fasts like 12 to 24 hours too early. Right? The morning of the Tisha B'Av and the 3 weeks is not about the building. Yes, it's the focus of the storytelling of the holiday, but it's about what the Beis Hamikdash represents. That's truly, truly the story here. To illustrate, again, we're going to wax a little bit poetic and paint a picture of life back in the day. Take a second to imagine that you live I don't know, in Yerushalayim or outside Yerushalayim. That's probably better. Let's say you live in Tveria during temple times. Right? You are married to a blacksmith. I don't know. Business is good. You live in a community on top of a hill, with a bunch of neighboring communities, some neighboring mountaintops. Religiously, you're happy with your family, your life, you have money, you have health, you have wealth, fantastic. 3 times a year, you make the, day and a half journey to Shalim. Right? You offer the different korbanos for each holiday. Once in a while after a simcha, or maybe after you're saved from some scary situation, maybe your blacksmith house got caught on fire and you're able to put it out before anybody got hurt, or you're traveling and the wagon lost a wheel or something. Fine. So you bring a korban toda, a korban of thanksgiving in the Beis Hamikdash. Right? If business is good, so then you bring a korban just because you can. Right? Or on the flip side, let's say you do something on Shabbos you didn't know was usher. Say tying your shoelace in a double knot. I don't know. That's a malacha of kosher, right? And you've done an Isser Daraisa. If you didn't know it was usher, that's b'shogeg. You realize your mistake, you bring a korban chatas, right? When you give birth, mitzvah Shem, so you bring a series of korbanos, right? Part of the purification process. On Yom Kippur, you might, if you're coming in for Sukkot, you might as well come for Yom Kippur. Bring the kids to see the red string tied to the door of Beis Hamikdash turn white as soon as the Kohen Gadol finishes his avodah. You have a pomegranate tree in the backyard. When it starts blooming every winter, you mark some with a red cloth, and then you bring the first fruits of the season to Yerushalayim as bikurim. You get the idea, right? When the Beis Hamikdash was standing, right, God was ever present in our lives. Right? Kosh Baruch Hu wasn't something that competed with Netflix and TikTok for attention. Right? Hashem was everything. Right? Beis Hamikdash was this connection with the Kosh Baruch Hu that each and every Jew felt on a strong level, on a not if not daily, then weekly level. Right? Our lives revolved around the Beis Hamikdash, and consequently, our lives revolved around the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Right? We all have a relationship with the Kodesh Baruch Hu nowadays, right? But I don't think anybody would argue and characterize their relationship with Hashem as ever present, right? Myself included, right? Unfortunately, right, most of us kind of relate to Kodesh Baruch Hu when we feel like it, right? When we need something, and when we daven, and when we learn, and when we fast, when we keep the Chagim, Shabbos, whatever, then we have time for Kodesh Baruch Hu. But when we're working or having fun or doing other stuff, then very often a Kodesh Baruch Hu, right, takes a back seat. And I think we can all agree that our connection with Akash Baruch Hu could be a little stronger, right? Myself included. And yet, we are all very complacent with that relationship, right? Very few people actively think, I need to be closer to Hashem, right? You're straight out of SEM, so maybe you disagree with that assessment. Maybe you think I'm being a little pessimistic. And Baruch Hashem, I hope that fire never leaves you. Okay, but not everybody is a bas aliyah, right? Some of us may want to daven better or learn more or eat a higher standard of kashrus, but I think few of us want to have Hashem more present in our lives. And in general, we're pretty happy with our connection to Kosh Baruch Hu. He's around when we want him, but he's not so close to the point where we can run to the beach for a few hours and just forget about our godly connection, like while we sunbathe. And in the mitzvahs we do, how many of the mitzvahs we do are performed to the best of our ability? Right? Most of the mitzvahs we do nowadays are by rote, right? Without any feeling or thoughts or contemplation. How many times have you actually sat down and thought for 5, 10, 20, 30 seconds about what you were about to do? Maybe a minute before davening. How many times have you studied the halachos of the upcoming Chag with like a real need to understand? Most of the time we show up, we shake the lulav, we eat the matzah, okay, fine. And we don't really take time to think about it. This is what Rav Pinkus writes as a pshat in the Medrash in Eicha. Medrash there says that Hashem took his anger out on sticks and stones instead of Klal Yisrael. What does that mean? What could the Medrash probably mean? Hashem need to take his anger out? Hashem doesn't need to take out his anger. He's not a person. What does that mean? Hashem doesn't have these kinds of emotions. Right? So Rav Pinkus explains, right, that the Jews meaning that was the chesed that Hashem did for us. What does that mean? So Rav Pinkus explains that the Jews at that time were doing Averos, right? We know the Averos, right? The big three, whatever. But they also had the Beis Hamikdash. And as we kind of illustrated a second ago, right, that means they brought korbanos every day. And each day those korbanos would be mechaper, right, for the sins they were committing. Right? If they did an Avera, they would bring a korban. So the Jews were in an endless, vicious cycle. They would sin, they would get atonement, they would sin again, they would get atonement again. And this happened day after day. To break the cycle of sin, of complete, right? Just they were just going downhill and getting a kapara for it. To break the vicious cycle, HaKadosh Baruch Hu destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, right? To shock them and to wake them up from their stupor, right? It was as if he was saying, it's not okay. This lifestyle is not okay. Yes, you are getting kapara through a technicality, but you need to change the daily routine, right? Because the Jews could not get themselves out of their ingrained habits. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to break them out of it, right? By eliminating the medium that had cemented them, right, in that way of life. Right? It's like when a person is addicted to something, and the only way you can get them out of addiction is to remove the subject of their addiction. If you take, again, this is a silly example, but if you take away the cigarette, let's say there were no other cigarettes in the world, so that would remove the addiction. Would it be hard? Yes. Would it smack them in the face? Yes. Would it shock them? Yes. You need to stop. So the Beis Hamikdash had become this type of tool for continuing the depraved lifestyle that they had kind of gotten used to. And so Hashem had to destroy this implement, right, of their addictions. And that was enabling their addictions. And so for someone who thinks their relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is on solid ground, and your relationship with Hashem is good, and I guarantee you, the Jews at the time of the Beis Hamikdash thought their relationship with Hashem was good. For a person to suddenly realize in a moment of like horrifying clarity that your relationship with Hashem is not good, that's terrifying. And that was basically the understanding the Jews came to realize as they marched out of Yerushalayim with blood flowing in the streets. Right? Religiously, things were not as good as they'd imagined. Right? Yirmiyahu's warnings were not, in fact, like the ravings of a mad lunatic. Right? He was actually Hashem's prophet. And this is where Soloveitchik points out. He has a sefer called "The Lord is Righteous in All His Ways." It's in English. It's pretty powerful. So the English is a little bit archaic, but if you can get through it, it's very good. So he writes that the first word in the kinos in the morning, right? The kinos are like the slichos, which is specifically for Tisha B'av about all the destruction. So the first word we say for the kinos in Tisha B'av morning, right, is shavas. It has a connotation of suddenness. Like Shabbos is if like when Akash Baruch Hu rested on Shabbos and the day changes from Kodesh to Chol and from Chol to Kodesh on Friday, right? It changes instantly, right? So too in an instant, the Mesa Hamikdash was destroyed. In the sense that the Jews had been told, they had been informed, they had been prophesied that the Beis Hamikdash wasn't going to be destroyed, but no one expected it to actually happen. So when it happened, it was so sudden. Right? It was normally when a person expects a disaster, right? Let's say a weather disaster, right? A hurricane or tsunami or whatever. So again, in Rahman al in Florida, right? People have so they board up the windows, right? People travel. There. People are ready for it. For the Churban, no one was ready, right? Even though they were siege, right? They were besieged. It was so sudden, says the Rav, that even Yirmiyahu, right, who had prophesied countless times that Yerushalayim was going to be destroyed, even Yirmiyahu didn't expect it to be so quick. Akash Baruch Hu sent him to like buy a field from like his uncle or something, not totally 100% holding in the Navi, but I probably should be. Okay, anyway. And when he came back, the Beis Hamikdash was gone. So the Jews for sure thought that they were on good terms with the Kosh Baruch Hu, right? That things would be fine. Now, for us, what if things are not as good as we think? Right? At the very simplest, Tisha B'av is a warning shot across the bow, right? The bow of a boat, of a bow. I don't know. But however, it's a warning shot. It's a period to recognize that our relationship with the Kosh Baruch Hu might not actually be as good as we think it is. Right? It's a time to reassess. It's a time to do real cheshbon nefesh, to take ourselves out of our daily routine and reevaluate. Right? We've talked about why this happens before Elul, right before Rosh Hashanah. It makes sense. Okay. But this is where Rav Pinkus writes. I've kind of like, fluffed it up and directed it towards, the proper audience. But this is what Rav Pinkus writes in Galus and Nechama, that there is an avodah for us to complete on these days. There is a spirituality waiting for us, right? There is a point. There's a purpose to all this stuff, all this mourning, right? It's not a chag like Pesach and Shavuos and Sukkot when it's happy, but there is an avodah that we can accomplish through the mourning and the tragedy and the horrors of and the sadness. Right. First of all, again, he goes through how difficult it is to relate to this destruction. Okay, we kind of illustrated that the concept of mourning is hard for us or whatever. But he says if you look back at our history, right, and basically gives that entire speech that we just gave us, times change. Right, if Pincus writes that Bnei Yisrael's situation changes. It's not always the same. It usually has a lot more bad than good. It's like Bnei Yisrael compared to the moon. It does come back to good, but it also turns to darkness sometimes. Right? 80 years ago, in the times of the Holocaust, the Jewish world was half destroyed. Right? Again, hatred had been building for a while. That's documented. Okay. No one expected the destruction of European Jewry. Right? Obviously, as eerily similar to the fact of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, which we talked about a second ago. Nowadays, today, in today's day and age, he was speaking 20 years ago, we've had 70, 60, 70s, 80 years of peace and prosperity. But as you know, times change. Right? Sometimes there's a reckoning. There's a din and cheshbon for past averos. Right? Pincus points out that Bilam, right, in Parshas Balak, tried to curse Bnei Yisrael. Right? Rashi illustrates there that Bilam's true power was that he knew what time of day HaKadosh Baruch Hu got angry. And Kivyochel, right? So Kivyochel, right? And Bilam would curse at that time, and the curse would come true. And yet during those days, when Bilam was trying to curse us, Hashem didn't get angry. Right? He withheld his anger. That was the great chesed that Hashem did to us. Right. And so Bilam had no choice but to bless us because there was no window of time. There's no opportunity to curse Bnei Israel. So Rav Pinkus points out there are many lessons from this story, and we've talked about it. First and foremost, how much Hashem loves us and goes out of his way to protect us, even though we don't have any idea that it's happening. Right. That parsha happens outside of the point of view of Bnei Israel. Okay. But a simpler message says Rav Pinkus, is that Akash Baruch Hu gets angry at us at some point every day. Right? And if there's a reason to enter into a judgment for us, chas v'shalom, then Hashem will do so. Right? Akash Baruch Hu didn't in the desert, right, the times of Bilam, but he has done so in the past. Right? What happens if 60, 70, 80 years of Averos and complacency in Yiras Shamayim catches up to us? Right? I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. Right? That's a Saturday Night Live reference if you're not holding, but that's okay. But part of the reflection of Bnei Israel's history on Tisha B'Av is this, is that we need to do tshuva now, right, before things spiral. Right? Get this in there. You guys know there are already rumblings in the world with all the increased anti-Semitism. Right? There are warnings. Right? We've had several, for example, I just sometimes you have to kind of take the big picture and kind of really, really assess. Something happened to us again. Chas v'shalom, it should get any worse. Something that happened to us in our house, not anti-Semitism, but just something that I don't know why I put this here, but okay, the idea is the same. We had recently in the last month we had several things in our house break because of water. Right, water damage in the ceiling. Washing machine right started leaking. Air conditioner was leaking. Central air was leaking. And at some point, you sit down and think, okay, what's water? Mayim, water is Torah, right? And so okay, for me, a little cheshbon nefesh, there must be some sort of breach in my limud Torah. Now, did I think there was? Not really. All summer I've been going to kollel 4 hours in the morning. At the night, I'm recording the daf yomi for another hour or so. Certainly I didn't think I was slacking, but apparently I was. Right, so you dive in and you do a cheshbon nefesh. This is what Tisha B'av is. Right, says Rav Pinkus. It's an opportunity for an honest assessment through history, through realizing that things are not always as amazing in history, right, as they are right now, and they could get worse. And he says that about the Brisker Rav. Pinkus says about the Brisker Rav that when he was on his deathbed, Rav Shach went to him and tried to console him, and told the Brisker Rav, and he says, not everyone leaves over large families with Gedolei Torah like you have. Right? Be proud of your lineage. Right? And Brisker Rav said to him, do you think I haven't cried and fasted and davened so much for about my children many times over? And says Rav Pinkus, if the Brisker Rav, who was one of the Gedolei Ador, cried and fasted and davened for his kids to go on stay on the derech, then how much more so we should do the same, cry and fast and daven for the future of Am Yisrael. Right? It says Rav Pinkus, right? Tisha B'av is a time to cry about the past, but also a time to cry about the future. He quotes the Yalkut Shimoni, the Medrash in Yirmiyahu, and said that when Bnei Yisrael were sitting on the rivers of Bavel, and they realized that Yirmiyahu was not coming with them, right? Because he was beginning to stay in Eretz Yisrael with the few poor Jews who were able to stay. So Bnei Yisrael started crying, and they wanted him to come with them. And Yirmiyahu said to them, I testify with you, with the heavens and the earth, if you had just cried once when you were still in Eretz Yisrael, while you were still in Yerushalayim, you never would have been exiled. Right? Bnei Yisrael had done all the mitzvahs, right? They had Pesach, Shavuos, and so on, but they didn't have Tisha B'av yet, and they weren't able to cry about the future. So says Rav Pinkus, if we're able to cry before a calamity, so then it will save us, chas v'shalom, from crying after a calamity. So that's the avodah we have on Tisha B'av, to try and reassess our worldview, to reassess our avodah in relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, I don't want it to be all doom and gloom. Right? We do want to kind of give a little bit of encouragement. And Rav Dessler writes this in Michtav Me'Eliyahu, right, that Hashem will never forsake us. Right, that's a promise. Right, he quotes Rav Chaim Volozhin in his drasha for Slichos. There's a strange Gemara in Bechoros and Davches, which Davches is famous for the mermaid thing on the top of it. If you've ever seen that, if you haven't, I apologize. I probably just piqued your interest. But anyway, Bechoros Davches on Chesma base, which says that the Sabe de Be Asuna, that's a bunch of Talmidei Chachamim, asked Rabbi Yeshua ben Chananya, when salt goes bad, what do you salt it with? Salt was something they used to use to preserve things. So what the Rashi explains is that meaning when the Torah calls our bris with the Kodesh Baruch Hu bris melech olami, that the relationship between Hashem and Bnei Yisrael is a bris melech, is a bris is a connection of melech, of salt. So the question was, when that goes bad, when the salt goes bad, when the relationship with Hashem goes bad, when the sins cause our exile, and as exile causes further sins because we're further away from Hashem, and now that we're exiled, we're just doing more sins because what are we supposed to do? We're further from our Kodesh Baruch Hu. So by definition, it's just going to spiral. So how are we going to get out of it? right? So what hope do we have to achieve atonement in the end? So Rishu ben Chananya said, well, you're gonna get out of it with the birth pangs of a barren woman, with the Chevle Leda, with the birth pangs, the pain of childbirth of a woman who's barren. So the Chachamim asked him, I don't understand, does a barren woman have birth pangs? A woman, Rahman al God forbid, who can't have children, can have childbirth pains. So Rabbi Shimon ben Chananya said, yeah, but salt doesn't go bad either. And the point was, right, if a woman who is barren, Rahman al has birth pangs, has pain of childbirth, that means she wasn't barren. And salt also doesn't spoil. The same idea, meaning the truth, the relationship with Ash between Ashkash Baruch Hu is compared to salt because it doesn't go bad. And that's exactly the point. So Hashem will give us Siyata Deshmaya, right? But on the other hand, right, this paragraph doesn't exactly end exactly the way you might be thinking. Hashem does not just give us a free pass, right? That would just ruin the whole concept. Right? So if Desla ends off that if somehow we don't do tshuva, Rahman al Hashem will bring upon us a king whose decrees are harsh and we'll end up doing tshuva out of desperation. Okay, but there's no yesh. We can't give up, right? Because eventually we'll get it right. But Akash Baruch Hu is going to kind of push the envelope. So where we have this avtacha that Hashem will take care of us, we still need to go through the work. We still need to do the cheshbon nefesh and kind of relate right to this to the day of Tisha B'av and use that as a kind of launching pad for our Avodah Hashem and for Elul and for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. Just to end off with one more order, Rav Melech points out that the Zohar Kodesh in Parshas Devarim notes that the word Eicha, right, Eicha, Megillah's Eicha, is the same letters as Ayeka, right? When Hashem calls out to Adam, right, we've pointed out that when the first thing that Hashem said after Adam sinned, right, was Ayeka, was where are you? Right, the Kosh Baruch Hu was calling out, where are you? I want a relationship with you. Where are you? Don't run away from me. So Rav Melech says that he points to Zohar Kodesh that Eicha is also Ayeka, and the Gemara tells us in Megillah and Daf Chavtes, right, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai tells us that Bo Rei Kama Chaviv in Yisrael Lifnei Kosh Baruch Hu. See how how dear Bnei Yisrael is to Hashem. Shebachol Makom Shegalu Shechina Imayim. And that every place that Bnei Yisrael got exiled, Hashem's Shechina is with them. And it points out, based on Psukim, when they went to Mitzrayim, Hashem was with them. When they went to Bavel, Hashem was with them. When we're going to be redeemed, eventually Hashem will come from exile with us. Like, it's Psukim, etc., etc. So Hashem, if Hashem is calling out and saying, Ayeka, where are you? That means he's calling out not only from the heavens, but he's calling out from beside us, next to us, right? In Golus with us, right? As we're going to say in Elul, right? Elul's coming up. Melech Masada, Kosh Baruch Hu comes close to us. Ani Ladodi Dodi Li. Just another Nikuda, another inyan of the proximity between Av and Elul, right? That Hashem is with us in Golus, and Hashem is with us as we try to get closer to Him, both in Elul and in Chodesh Av. So says Zohar Kodesh, this Tisha B'av, even in the destruction, it's still a time of great closeness between us and Hashem because Hashem's Shekhinah is with us in Galus. And through the mourning, and mourning the lack of relationship that we have, or the lack of the perception of the closeness that we have, so then we're Zocha, right, to renew that kesher with Hashem. Melech Kotz Chasim Sofer explains that the pasuk says in Tehillim, "Bonei Yerushalayim Hashem Nidchei Yisrael Yikanes." Right, we quote that pasuk often. I think it's in, I forget which part of Tefillah it's in. But it says, Bonei Yerushalayim Hashem. Hashem is building Yerushalayim. Nidchei Yisrael Yikanes. He's going to gather the exiles of Am Yisrael. Says the Chasam Sofer, I understand. Nidchei Yisrael Yikanes, that Hashem will gather the exiles, that's in future tense. Bonei Yerushalayim, Hashem is rebuilding Yerushalayim, that's in present tense. Why does it say present tense that Hashem is rebuilding Yerushalayim? So he explains based on several places in Chazal. There's a Rashi in Rosh Hashanah Daf Lama that seems to indicate this. Not exactly beferish in that Rashi. I looked it up. It's not exactly clear, but okay. So Rav Melech suggests, and the Chasam Sofer suggests that that's what Rashi says. So therefore, that's what Rashi says. That the third Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt immediately. That Rashi does suggest that. Maybe it'll drop from the sky. Okay. Anyway, it'll be the Gemara there wonders that if the Beis Hamikdash is it's technicality. Just to give you the context. If the Beis Hamikdash might be rebuilt immediately, let's say in the middle of the night or the middle of the morning, whatever, there may not be enough time to process the Korban Omer. So what do you do on Pesach? Okay, whatever, with the new grain. But it says the Chasam Sofer, how is the Beis Hamikdash rebuilt? Right, through the tears and the pain of those who mourn for Yerushalayim. And so every year when Bnei Yisrael gather to cry about the Korban, right, that adds to the building. And when it's finished, the building will just come down, right, built and refined, etc. So it says Bona, that Hashem is currently, presently, actively building the Beis Hamikdash, right, through the morning. And finally, one more last story, right, that Rav Melech quotes from the Tolner Rebbe, right? He said that again to give chizuk to his Hasidim and to give and for us, right, to kind of hammer home the point that we need to put in this effort and put in this work. Rav Tolner Rebbe said once that he was at the table with his Hasidim, and he told his Hasidim that he had met Mashiach. And Mashiach asked him, right, should I come now or should I wait? Because once I come, right, the neshamos that are not complete and that have not fulfilled their tikkun and have not gotten to the highest level, right, they will no longer be able to do so. Right, there won't be so much free will. Hashem's glory will be so obvious. There won't be the same taivas in the world, etc. And the Tolna Rebbe said to him, I think you should have mercy on those neshamos who have not yet reached their tikkun, and therefore we should wait until those neshamos have accomplished what they've been put in this world to accomplish. Again, is it a real story? I don't know, but he was trying to bring home a point. So one chassid said to him, because of those rishayim, because of those bombs, we have to suffer. We have to wait. So the Rebbe said, yes, and you are one of them. Nobody knows what the Gullus is continuing because of. Nobody knows what the storm of anti-Semitism or the punishments that Am Yisrael are getting are because of. Right? Yonah, right, knew it was him. Right? Yonah knew when Yonah got was told to do a nevuah and he ran away, he didn't want to do it. There's a storm, right? He was on the boat, right? He told him to throw him overboard. Yonah knew it was him. Right? We don't know Hashem's judgments. But it could be that all the people we think who are holding back the Beis Hamikdash, the people doing Averos in Tel Aviv and LA and wherever they are, right? Whatever it is. Could be those people are Tinokos Shinishbu, right? Completely honest, right? Maybe they don't know any better, and maybe they're not getting punished for their sins at all. Right? But us who do know better, right? Yet we still fail to live up to the high standards, right, that Kosh Baruch Hu set for us, right? So maybe we are the ones, right, whose tshuva is being ma'akev, is holding back the redemption. So let's be mechazik ourselves. Let's do the cheshbon nefesh on our devotees Hashem, and realize that our relationship with Hashem may not be as good as we thought it is, right? As we think it is, right? Redouble our efforts to learn, to daven, to increase our ben al chavero, our ben al makom, and in mitzvah Hashem. Together we will build, right, in the present tense, right, the Beis Hamikdash, so that it drops down from heaven, completely built. Amen. King Ratzon. See you guys at the Beis Hamikdash. Good luck getting a flight, and be in touch.